All right, now it's time for a panel. This is the future of fintech. Now, every fintech event needs to have a session titled Future of Fintech, else you're not allowed to host the event. This is actually in the Geneva Convention. Do you know that? Well, now you know. You're welcome. There are many methods of divining the future: palmistry, face ID, reading tea leaves. But we've opted for the best among these, just calling a stellar lineup of speakers in one panel, from Mastercard to Salesforce to the NPCI and Coinbase. This session will cover what consumers and businesses can expect in the coming year, along with discussing a few emerging trends in fintech. So would you please join me in welcoming on stage Ari Sarker, Co-President of Asia Pacific for Mastercard, Arundhati Bhattacharya, Chairman and CEO of Salesforce India, Dilip Asbe, Managing Director and CEO of the NPCI, Surojit Chatterjee, Chief Product Officer of Coinbase, and this session will be moderated by Amitabh Tiwari, the Chief Innovation Officer at Razorpay.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this really interesting session on the future of fintech. It's my privilege to welcome all of you here. You're all established experts in your fields. So let me jump right onto the topic. Hello Ari, good to see you. Finally you were able to surmount the tech challenge.
Glad to see you. Had a little bit of a technical challenge getting in, so apologies for that.
No worries. We were just about to get started. So let me start by asking all of you first. I mean, since you all hold vantage positions in the companies that you represent, and you had a long and very distinguished career, how do you see fintech? Do you see it as a short-term disruption for remedies which are not fundamental, or do you see it as a long-term force for good, which is going to bring efficiencies, make the customers happier, make the businesses stronger? So how do you see it? I mean, and this question is to all of you. Let's start with Ari.
Well, thanks Amitabh, pleasure to be here. And I think, honestly, fintech, this is just the tip of the iceberg from my perspective. If you really think about where technology is going, and I'll talk about some of the bigger enabling technologies. 4G has driven a lot of the growth that we've already seen. 5G is going to be the next clip of growth. The smart devices proliferation just across the world, and what we are calling the Internet of Things, of connected devices, this is only going to continue to accelerate. And I honestly feel that what you're going to see by way of solving for real challenges in this divide of what I call the haves and the have-nots, which has been a very vexing problem for policymakers, government, and others. I think technology is going to be a massive enabler, where you're going to see bridging that gap between the haves and have-nots can be done, really effectively with a fintech-enabled play. Now, having said that, the divide has worsened in the last few years, so you might push back to me, but I really believe that there are some real big enablers that fintech in the coming years will have that can make a big change.
No, that's a very interesting point of view. Dilip, what are your views on this?
No, rightly said by my friend Ari, and the technology. Rather, I would put it this way: that rate of change of technology is very high now, and I think the fintechs that are able to cope up with the rate of change of technology, right? They will succeed. So simply put up, a lot of fintech could survive because of the operational efficiency, right? The operational efficiency, for example, one player, legacy financial institution, you become a service provider, and you kind of strive on his operational deficiencies and provide a better service and kind of survive, get better revenues, get better kind of business. But now I think the financial institutions are asking for exponential change. They want to have the solutions which are kind of a zero manual intervention, the AI assisted models. So I think the game is changing now, and I think the fintechs that are very good with all the new age technologies, or deep tech kind of fintechs, will have a better chance of success, in my opinion.
No, which is absolutely an interesting thought. Ma'am, coming to you, And let me blend another thought process to it. Apart from talking about fintech and the long-term, sort of impact that fintech pairs are going to have and how the next decade looks like, let me also bring in the color of the interplay between banks and fintechs. So when you talk about how the future looks like for fintechs in the long term, maybe you could also sort of tell us from your own experience in your previous role, how does this partnership between banks and fintechs, how does that play out, and how is it likely to play out in the long run?
So let me first answer your first question, whether fintechs sort of plug the gaps in products or whether they're a force for the good. And I would say it's both. There are many things when we start putting in applications. There are many gaps in the applications, especially when you try and apply them locally. I'll give you a very small instance. Take the vernacular. Now, there are many of our applications that we have which can only support English or maybe Spanish, but they do not support the 29 languages that I'd like to go for in India. Now, I know fintechs who have the products to help us do that. So they do support very local needs, which probably will not be developed globally because it doesn't have a big enough addressable TAM for the global teams to go after. But yet, it has enough of an application to make it very locally relevant. Okay. So I have heard of companies, wanting to open up in, say, countries in Africa, say Rwanda, say Botswana. But one of their major things is we need to address people in the vernacular. And there's no way that they're getting that support. So somebody who's developing it for India can probably do it for them as well. Okay. So the fact
for the market is what you're saying.
Yes. So the fact of the matter is fintechs are very important for closing up these gaps, which big global companies may not really be looking at. Now, whether they're a force for the good, absolutely. They are a force for the good because of the fact that they really and truly get into how to make things more nimble and agile so as to ensure that, more and more people are able to absorb this, use them, and then, spread the efficiency gains and the production gains that can come out of all of this transformation. Regarding how the banks interact with fintechs, you have to understand banks have one thing which the fintechs don't have, and that is longevity and trust. Now, when you are putting your money into an institution, that's one of the things that you're going to look for. That is the element of trust and longevity. Now, fintechs, often what happens is if you put up 10 fintechs, maybe 2 of them survive, 8 of them don't. So there is a paucity of trust that they have. So while on the one hand, fintechs have the agility to innovate very quickly and put products out in the market, what they don't have is staying power. What they don't have is customer connect, which again the banks have. So actually speaking, they can be ideal partners. The banks bringing in their customer base and the trust that the customers have on them. Fintechs bringing in the innovation in a very agile manner. So the combined entity actually works very well. And when I was in SBI, actually, we had set up a 200 crore fund just to work with fintechs. Now, this was a one of a kind in a public sector. We did it with board approval. We put in an external committee to assess which are the fintechs that we would work on, so that there will be no talk about doing the not right things. I won't say the wrong things, but not right things. So put in enough governance around it. And this was way back. Means I've now retired 3 years back, and this must have been 5 years back that we put this together, because we realized that they are an important part of the ecosystem. They should not be ignored. Rather, they need to be encouraged so as to solve many of the problems in a far more agile and a far more, more affordable manner than probably, if you look for global giants to come and solve those issues.
So multiple very interesting points I gathered from what you spoke about, and I'm going to come back to Dilip on the custom building for the market point, and a couple of others which make for a very interesting conversation. But let me first hear Surojit's views on this topic. And as we are all aware, he currently works with an organization which is really strong in the area of blockchain-based solutions. Something which has had, I would say, two contrarian views, with a large set of people supporting it, another set, still wondering whether it has the right kind of business case, etc., and the right kind of control. So let's hear from Surojit on this topic about fintechs with a color of blockchain coming in.
Absolutely. Look, from my vantage point, I mean, fintech has to be is a force for good. And if we look at digital currencies, we believe digital currencies are probably the biggest disruption in finance and payment in probably 100 years, or since the beginning of kind of creation of money. Maybe I can just take a quick step back to explain what digital currencies are, because I don't know everybody is on the same page. It's very high, at a very high level. You can think of crypto that it solves the problem of trust without needing an intermediary. So you don't need a bank or a network to facilitate exchange of value. It is enabled by technology and powered by a worldwide network of computers that are coordinating with each other. And it is trustless, but it's secure. Transactions are all written on the public blockchain, which you can think of as a large public database. It's very transparent. The user's identity is protected. You get open access. Anybody can access it. Borderless payments, low transaction fee, very efficient transactions. So this is the kind of the next generation of technology that will disrupt finance at its core. That's what we believe. Of course, there are many hoops to jump before we realize the dream. But what we are seeing, or what we think, is digital currencies, and it does not need to be all like decentralized currencies. There are also state-sponsored, like central bank digital currencies. There are digital currencies that are pegged to state currencies, like a US dollar or a euro or even Indian rupee maybe one day. What it will do is just like what happened with the internet. Internet opened up access to information. Anybody with a mobile phone and 5G or 4G network can access the whole library of the world. Same thing with the mobile phone and an internet connection. Anyone can access financial services from anywhere in the world. And anyone can also build and offer some of these financial services. And it can be composable, just like internet application can build on each other. So we think this is a revolutionary technology that will change how we think about finance in the years to come.
Very interesting. And probably we will also come back to you and try and touch upon the whole, I would not call it a missing link, but the whole piece of how to broad base it, how to make sure that, central banks and governments around the world do sort of, accept, this point of view or stand, and then create the right framework for the adoption of, crypto, digital currencies, and other blockchain, solutions. But let me come to Dilip quickly. So Dilip, Mrs. Bhattacharya spoke about custom building for markets. And India, of course, is a big market, has leapfrogged some of the technologies. And NPCI has played a transformational role in India in driving payments and beyond, right? Parts of banking as well. So just wanted to hear your views on how, and you've been with NPCI for a long time, you helming it now, how you have maintained this startup spirit in NPCI despite it becoming such a large organization. How do you still manage to do it? And having established UPI and a whole bunch of other successful products, what are the next big bets that you are making, and how are you going to be solving the challenges that Bharat, which is, of course, we all know what I'm referring to, that Bharat faces, and to take it to their doorsteps. So, to you.
No, obviously, again, this is a very difficult, NPCI has grown up now, and always I speak about it that if the top 10 banks in the country wouldn't have come in and selflessly built this institution, today you wouldn't have seen NPCI, right? So obviously the banks, RBI, and the government has to take a lot of credit for building NPCI and the products which has been rolled out by NPCI. But it's a difficult situation now, right? Because everybody is struggling to because look at it this way. The speed of technology, change of technology has increased. The market is changing. The customer expectations are increasing, right? So and obviously the volumes are increasing, right? So at the same time, we are trying to work on all the 4 or 5 fronts in terms of how do we respond back to the situation. Fortunately, NPCI, right from the beginning, and thanks to Mr. Hota, we built NPCI as a technology organization, right? So all of us, all 1,000 employees of NPCI, we believe that we are a technology organization. So, we kind of work and respond to the situation. How a fintech would have responded, or a startup would have responded. So that is, again, it's getting difficult now, right? But we try to, the senior management team reflects back and trying to come back and saying that how can we respond faster? How can we do more? Yeah, that's the attitude which keeps us going, Amitabh.
No, that's wonderful to hear, Dilip, and many kudos on what you've already done and what you're going to continue to do. Now let me come to Ari, and Ari has this this unique sort of lens of having led Mastercard in South Asia and therefore having seen India from very close quarters. And of course now he has Asia Pacific as his remit, and of course a very strong view, I think rich view on how things are moving globally. So coming to you, Ari, what are the big trends you're seeing around the world, and how do you think the Indian fintech space, how does it measure up to what is happening in Asia and around the world?
So, I think I'll share my thoughts, but Surojit is also here, based out of the US. I really feel that the US is clearly a leader, like for decades, and my general sense is going to continue to sustain that lead, even in the coming decades. There's a whole variety of reasons. There's a culture, there's a risk-taking appetite, there's a whole bunch of things. Ease of business is a massive enabler in the US. You can open and shut companies with relative ease. I think if you look at the India scenario and I compare it to rest of Asia, I think the India market for fintech and just investment and technology per se, moving just beyond fintech, has become really vibrant in the last 5-7 years. You only have to look at, if you attend a Sequoia Capital event or any of these other big events, you're going to see the volume of opportunities that come from India compared to ASEAN or any of these other markets. So in Asia Pacific specifically, I'd say that ASEAN is that sleeping giant. It's starting to get its act together. You're seeing Singapore wanting to play a very big role in this space, and they're really attracting a lot of capital and talent with that. I think where Singapore scores heavily over India is ease of business is a very significant enabler over India. I think India, I want to compliment the entrepreneurial class that despite, a lot is being said politically about ease of business, and frankly, fundamentally, not much has changed. I'll give you a live example. I sit on a board of a company which was in the education learning space, which we are shutting down because, the proposition didn't work. Probably had about 1 crore of capital. The tax assessments have been done. And now suddenly the scrutiny that goes on for last 18 months on a company that had like 75 lakh rupees of capital, which has had expenses over a period of 3 years, right? And now for a small company to go to Ahmedabad to meet with tax collectors, I just feel that India's got some, still real issues to solve on ease of business. And if they can do that, I actually feel the entrepreneurial class that's coming out and has always had that in India is on companies like obviously yourselves, Razorpay. I talk about ScienceZ. There are many other such, Citizen, who are really doing a lot of great work on transit and other spaces. You've got a really vibrant ecosystem of companies, but we really have to unleash the potential of these players because the rest of the world and rest of Asia is also catching up, and they're going to move faster. They'll make rules simpler. I think we need to make sure our entrepreneurs are able to focus on clients and customers, and rules cannot be developed for that 1% that is going to be the crooks in the system, and therefore everybody else pays the price for a convoluted system. So I think to me that's the place. But I really have to give credit that despite the challenges of starting businesses and running businesses, I think the India fintech universe has become a really vibrant play in the last 5-7 years.
Great thoughts, Ari. And interestingly, if you can see, as you would be seeing on the right side, panel of your screens, we ran a quick poll, and the audience has responded saying that they believe almost, close to 30% of transactions will be cash-based in the year 2030, which means, majority of the people feel that transactions are going to move digitally just in a decade's time. That also shows or reflects, obviously this audience could be comprising of a very different set of people, more aware, but that still shows the confidence everyone has in the movement away from cash and winning the war. Yes, Ari?
Amitabh, the only thing I would add is I'd love to see that in 10 years that, we will have only 30% of transactions in cash. I pity for businesses like Dilip and myself, because the story we tell the street that the secular growth story is at least 20-30 years. And I genuinely believe that, I think it's a matter of context. And let me tell you the context. Whatever is the GDP of a country, you multiply that by 4 to 5 times, because cash has velocity. Remember, you can't rule out the velocity aspect, right? Is the volume of payment throughput that market will generate. So if you believe in 2030, India is, I don't know what the latest numbers are. After COVID, there might be a reset. But let's assume India is a 2030 is an $8 trillion economy, right? At 8 trillion, the opportunity for payments for a really fully digitized, you have to look at the Nordics and other countries, right? Including the UK. The opportunity for payments should be a 40 trillion flows. Now, I honestly believe, and thankfully, I don't believe we are solving all of that in 10 years. This is going to be a 20 to 30 year journey, and you're going to see this gradually come up. The large part of India, which is Bharat, has not yet started playing in this space. So I hope that we are going to be working on this story for the next 20 to 30 years and not solving everything in the next 10 years.
It's very hard to even wrap one's head around that number. It just seems too big to, even relate to. But I think it'll be great for the country and all of us here in this industry. But let me change tracks a little bit and, come to all of you and ask, what are the big bets you think, in your view, where the industry is going to move towards? What are the big changes which are going to sweep in the next decade? What are the big bets that you would, take for the growth of fintech and, banking and financial services industry? So maybe we can start with Ari or Surojit.
Sure. I think I am representing a big bet for the industry as a whole. As I said,
so digital currency is one, clearly, yes.
So digital currency is a big bet for fintech as a whole, and we think digital currency just creates this access, universal accessibility. I used to work at Google before, where the motto was making all information universally accessible and useful. I think digital currency does that for money, makes money and financial services universally accessible and useful across the world. So we think, for example, things like payments can be fundamentally disrupted, made more efficient with digital currencies. Like I have family in India still, and sending money to India, I'll be paying like 5% in the cost of remittances, latency, when the money reaches hand. It's anybody's guess, right? With digital currencies, it can be instantaneous almost, right? Few milliseconds, the fees can be less than, the cost can be less than 1%. It's so real-time cross-border transaction with very low cost that could revolutionize cross-border commerce, which is surging. All kinds of interbank transfers. We are already seeing many banks are using digital currencies for interbank transfers. So I think many countries in next 10 years will convert their currency into digital currency.
Got that.
Some of the countries are already ahead, like China and others. Singapore is taking a lead in digital currency adoption. So that's definitely a big bet, of course.
Even India, I think there has been some work on that. I mean,
to make this more interesting and not to be controversial, may I ask Mrs. Bhattacharya what is her views on this? Because I think the world is a little divided at the current time, and I certainly will share my thoughts. And Surojit, appreciate your thoughts on the next 10 years.
So if you're asking me what are the big bets, I think the big bets are that we are going to move into a world where there's going to be hyper-personalization because of the sheer amount of data that can be gathered and processed in milliseconds, so as to give a far greater idea about the individual. I think what will happen is that the power of data will keep moving back from the large corporates into private hands, and the ability to exercise choice in individuals will become that much more powerful. However, there are trends also that indicate that, because of the data availability across the board, there could be misuse of the same as well. And we have seen that already happening, about how people are getting influenced, how, trends are being sort of, it's almost in the class of getting brainwashed. So, how do you prevent those? So there would be a lot of work that would have to be done, not only on things like cybersecurity, on things like preventing any kind of outages, so redundancies. Just a few days back, Google went out across a few continents for just about maybe 10, 12 minutes, and it caused a huge uproar. Exactly. Imagine if everything was on cyber currency and something like that happened. Yeah. What would you do?
The infrastructure has to keep pace.
The infrastructure has to keep pace. And we are only dealing with the pandemic this time. The pandemic, however, has not stopped. For instance, the crops being planted and the food being, coming to the market. Now imagine that there is an enormous natural calamity event, which prevents, something like an enormous volcano eruption, which prevents the sun rays from reaching the earth. What happens then? There would be things like famine and stuff like that. It's not only a question of connectivity, we are looking at a world that's very, very uncertain. So we will be looking at very many scenarios as to how you build in redundancy, so that, these things which become totally, totally central to a person's being, such as connectivity, such as being able to, get onto the net, that these things don't get interrupted at all. So, a big use of data, both on the personal and on the corporate front. Hyper-personalization, that is individuals finding their own place. A lot of work on security, both cyber security, physical security. So all of that. Then as I said, looking at the changing world and trying to create scenarios as to what could possibly go wrong, and taking steps in order to protect yourselves against all of these. So many of these would be, big things as we go across. And actually the list is quite long. But I think, most companies are thinking on many of these areas, because all of this conferences about VUCA world, etc., we actually have managed to bring on ourselves the VUCA world. So we need to find ways of addressing that.
No, totally. And I think in a very short span of time, this pandemic has kind of demonstrated what could happen, how adoption could be, driven fast if the right kind of products and probably the right environment were created for consumers to adopt. We can, great to have Dilip back. I think there was some tech glitch that he must have faced. So Dilip, coming to you, but before that, quickly, Surojit, as you can see, the poll says that everyone has very deep confidence in cryptocurrencies. At least this audience feels so. 58% feel that cryptocurrencies are indeed the future. So that's great piece of news for you.
It might be conflict of interest, the attendance.
He's promoting his interest.
We are very happy with the digital payments progress in India.
So am I. So are we.
I'm just saying, of course.
With UPI, so absolutely.
No, see, I think every country looks at the CBDC has a different objective to go for CBDC, and I think if you look at China, right? China has gone there. China is looking for CBDC too. Because they believe now that there is no interoperability. Point number one, the two players have become too big to fail, and obviously no control, right? So this is the regulation lacking the innovation. This is the classic case of China. But I'm saying India, obviously CBDC is something which we should look for, and I'm sure the regulator will take the call at the right time to look at the specific use case, because I think the need has to be identified, and we should look at CBDC to only fulfill that gap. The second thing is, the trends and what we are going to look at. I think obviously the AI, as Madam said, AI and the data-driven approach will drive different, kind of decision making and different approach as far as the consumers are concerned. The second is, I think everybody will now look at building a super app. In my assessment, all the efforts will. Everybody wants to do everything now. So obviously, you looked at, there are some apps like Paytm, Google Pay, Phone Pay, Amazon Pay. Now the banks have started the race. Now YONO has the full-fledged marketplace. iMobile has started to become the same. So I think there are going to be a variety of apps which will trying to create their journey towards super app. And obviously on the cloud side, the cloud, whether it's a private, public, or a hybrid, cloud will play a very, very important role as far as the growth in digital India is concerned. So I think these are the 3-4 things I would say that will drive the growth in next 3 to 5 years time.
And how will the new digital framework like OCEN for credit, or let's say for data transfer through customer consent, like AA, etc. I mean, the JAM Trinity played a very important role in transforming the way financial services are distributed in India. How do you think these additional layers which are now introduced, and also cheekily, if I may say, how do you think of the NUE initiative that is going on, Dilip? And so, also on that once.
Yeah, in any panel I go, I ask that there is so much interest. I see everybody is applying. So I wanted to ask Madam also, Ari also, and who's applying? So and let me ask that question to you as well. Are you applying for NUE? So I will answer the first part. I think the both account aggregator and the OCEN model is revolutionary. I personally believe, and I keep telling Mr. Nilekani that they are ahead by 3 to 5 years as far as the design is concerned. So obviously, any new design takes its own time and takes the time to people to understand and kind of hooked onto the model. But I think that's a future. In my assessment, that's a future because people would want to leverage, and for a country like us, when we have so much data now being generated, if we don't utilize for credit and well-being, growing the consumption, it will be a waste in my assessment. So I think we will move towards those societies, but I think there might be some time lag which you would see maybe 6 months to 2 years time to kind of fully accept that open architecture for credit or a consent-based data sharing. While I say that, I think it's high time that we have a privacy law, because I'm saying if we go too far, right, it'll be too, again the similar problem while China might come, and that the things would have evolved so big that it will be taking a backseat position for some of the items which would have progressed would be very difficult in my assessment. So I think this has a future, and I think it might take some time to get there.
Well said, Dilip. And on the last piece on the NUE.
Okay, so I thought I answered on that, but obviously, we have been used to competing with the giants like Visa and Ari and the Visa team locally. So we are okay. I'm just saying that we are used to compete with the large players. So I'm sure the competition will only intensify, and I think that's good for the consumer, that's good for the market expansion. So that is the way I look at it.
And Dilip, today you are the giant. I just want to be very clear in this, right? We are the miners and NPCI is the giant. So, and I want to compliment you guys on what you have built in India, and just a phenomenal story of what you have really been able to deliver. I think I'm desperately trying, Amitabh, to find something controversial to disagree on. So,
Harry, finally you have to answer on NUE. That is that you can't just get away. Why?
But Dilip, my advice to you would be just go on the offensive, never be on the defensive.
Absolutely.
You can't defend territory. You have to acquire more territory.
Right.
Just go on the offensive.
Yeah, so,
on that count, very quickly, if you see the panel, there is a very clear indication hint. It's more than a hint for you, saying, the size of India, do you think there is space for another UPI equivalent? And there is a.
So if I link it to my earlier comment, if you assume that there is a 40 trillion digitization opportunity in India in the next 10 years, then I honestly feel the Reserve Bank of India is actually being very sensible to de-risk the single point of failure of one organization, and therefore allowing for, I don't know how many they will allow, but I think to have a little bit of a distributed environment where you're not being held, I think to Mrs. Bhattacharya's earlier example, like if there's a catastrophic impact on one player, then it should not cripple the economy in all ways. You'll be able to, load balance, shift across. I really love the idea of interoperability between the NUE and NPCI. That RBI, I think RBI has been really thoughtful. This is not about today. They're really looking 10 years, 15 years out, and basically saying, what do we need by way of a market and environment which is de-risked away from a single point of failure? And I think that is where this is actually going. And as Dilip has rightly said, I think NPCI is now competing on its own right. You look at all the innovation that they are bringing in, from video KYC to everything else that's coming down. I honestly feel, Amitabh, to your point, when you were saying, digitization for the sake of digitization, nobody gets excited, right? A business which is a small business, which is working in cash, cash works just as well. You've got to solve other things for that business. As government tries to formalize a large part of the informal economy, I think the application layers that is around the digitization of financial flows is going to be the real battleground. And are you really solving real pain points? And in that context, if I can be a little controversial and maybe a little bit of disagreement with Surojit, I do believe that, Bitcoins, or rather, Bitcoin is probably a bad term, but let's say stable coins and Coinbase and players like that, including CBDCs, have a role in solving for the cross-border challenge, as Surojit rightly pointed out. But I am not sure that if I am buying a coffee from Starbucks, it makes a wee bit of a difference whether I'm paying it on IMPS or whether I'm paying it on Coinbase or anything else. The merchant doesn't care, the consumer couldn't care less, right? So you've got to have a sense of what problem are you solving, and then technology comes to solve a problem. Technology for the sake of technology doesn't create any excitement.
Oh, that's well said. So, Surojit, any views on that?
Look, my views are this, right? If you can say, okay, if I'm just browsing your website, I'm okay with 3G. But if you have 5G, why would you use 3G? So it's the same thing. Yes, digital currencies probably makes the cross-border use case really, really simple. But even the domestic use case, yes, you can do it with kind of today's technology. But if it is better and more efficient, why not, right? It's just the transaction cost is much lower. Of course, digital currencies, I just want to make sure, right? It's not, there's a lot of technology layer that still needs to be invented, created to make digital currencies really usable. The usability of digital currencies is not there yet. I'll admit that at Coinbase, in fact, we have done a lot of work to make digital currencies accessible, usable, to normal people. What is this blockchain thing and Bitcoin? It's a little scary to think about, right? So there are ways to go there. There'll be, I think the big thing here is making financial services accessible. It's not just money and not just payment. When payment is is the gateway to everything, right? But let's say getting a loan, right? Let's say a mortgage, let's exchanging, creating liquidity in any market. So the promise of digital currency or digital currency technology is you can digitize value, digitize anything. You can digitize real estate, you can digitize, tokenize anything, tokenize a business. You can eventually, right, you can actually raise capital with those tokens. So just creating more efficiency overall in financial markets, right? So that's kind of my analogy. Is it's the 5G technology, right? It's still being built, but that's the future.
That's a good retort. Now, let me ask one final question to you guys. I'm a little mindful of the time, and I do want to keep a few minutes aside, to take questions from the audience, because it's not very often that they will find such a panel who they can ask questions to. So let me, seek the help of my team to start to open up the audience questions. But let me still, just to sort of summarize the debate or this discussion, let me ask you something which actually goes against, let's say, a company like ours, which is a high on adrenaline, fintech startup. The question is there too much of enthusiasm and almost a heightened optimism about what fintech can solve, and do you think there is a need for realism, or do you think this is not misplaced and the excitement is very real, and fintech would indeed be able to do in the next decade or so what took several decades to happen? For instance, like core banking and all is actually not very old, right? At least in India, 2 decades back, you had to go to the same branch where you have your account to be able to withdraw your money or to do any account transaction, or to the same bank's ATM, etc. And today, all of those things look like so far behind in time. So in the next 10 years or so, do you think all of this optimism, this enthusiasm that surrounds fintech, is all of that real? All of that is going to actually happen, or do you think there is a need for a little bit more realism and somewhere there is a bump ahead? This question is to all of you, and then maybe we will take a few questions from the audiences. And in your response, you may probably also talk about things like cross-border or, let's say convergence of methods, physical, digital, joining together, all of those things, right? So how do you see this happening?
So Amitabh, if I may say so, I think fintech alone can't solve problems. I think they should be very clear about this. Fintech alone can't solve the problem. It requires collaboration with the banks, because today, as Madam said, in India, nobody will keep money back without a trust and confidence. And I think thanks to the regulation in the country, the banks are solid, and the customer will never move away their money outside the banks. So there is a need for our fintechs to understand that they can solve the problems provided they are able to collaborate with the bank, right? So this is the first point. Second thing is the whole regulation has to come around, right? Today even if the fintechs and banks are ready to collaborate with each other, but if there is no innovation-led policies by the regulator and by the government, again there is no use, because whatever you are trying to do, if the policies are not changing the style or going to the next gen, there is no value. So thankfully, and again we have been talking about the cross-border challenge to be solved, and our regulator is so progressive that they have already launched the next cohort for the innovation as cross-border startup. So obviously regulator.
Third one on MSME, I believe. The third one on MSME also has been announced.
So I think our regulator is ahead on innovation and policies, which is very good, because that kind of creates the opportunities for the fintechs and banks to collaborate and provide the solution, solve the real problems what we all are facing. So I think it's going to be the whole collaboration game. It's going to be whole innovation-led policies as RBI is laying down. Look at it. Today the RBI has 24/7 RTGS. So I'm saying regulator is far ahead than all of us, right? We have to catch up to the innovation-led policy. So I think all these things put together will decide the future. The excitement is right in my assessment. Because there are many problems in the country like India to solve. We have to take digital payments to 5x of the GDP. Right now we are one-fourth of one-fourth or 50% of the GDP right now. So there is a 10x growth possible. So there are many problems which we can solve using the fintechs and banks collaborating with each other. But obviously the whole environment has to work with each other to, in a cohesive manner.
Ari, your thoughts?
No, I actually concur completely with Dilip. I think this is really going to be about more collaboration. He's talked about banks and fintechs. I'll actually throw the telcos in. Massive distribution, huge reach across India, right? Do not underestimate. And now with digital technology, your ability to get that distribution reach going at a fraction of a cost of what banks, a bank can never service an account with, 150 rupee balance. Whereas a telco does a prepaid for 120 rupees ARPU and yet is profitable, right? So you got to find a way to leverage the strengths of deep distribution expertise. And I really feel that is the future that's coming. And once the drama settles on this whole farm bills, I really feel deregulation and what the farm bill will deliver for India, for the farmer, and empowering the farmer to actually adopt and control their own destiny. And there's a whole suite of technology that's going to be targeted towards them, and fintechs will be a big enabler in that. I think is going to be the real empowerment of Bharat to connect with India. But India has strange ways of working. Whether it will be reality or not is something we'll have to wait and see.
So keeping fingers crossed and hope it works out well for us. Ma'am, quick thoughts from you. I can see that questions have already started streaming in. So quick thoughts from you.
No, the quick thought is that, the ecosystem throws up what is the need of the hour. So the fintechs, the fact that they have, multiplied in such numbers is basically because there is a need and they are sort of answering that need. Now, whether they will survive, whether they will not, will depend upon their business model, their ability to collaborate, their willingness to be part of the entire system or to stand out separately. So it's going to be, relevant from fintech to fintech. It's not something that you can paint with a broad brush. But the fact that there will be some outstanding successes, I have absolutely no doubt.
Very well said, ma'am. Surojit, your thoughts?
I think I can say it's amazing to see all the innovation that's happening in fintech space in India. Actually, I've kind of straddled both the worlds. I was leading product at Flipkart, and when UPI came out, and we built PhonePe. So I think India has really led the way in some of the innovation, and regulators have been actually ahead of time, I would say. So there's a lot to do, and I think if you look at the developed markets, the innovation is just beyond the pure digital kind of payments into, as I was saying, financial services. Like you can just click and buy a house somewhere else, right? You can do all your mortgage, lending, everything with digitally with kind of minimal need for face-to-face meetings or even documentation and so on. So things are much more smoother in many countries. And I think a lot of innovative companies in India are doing that, trying to do that, right? Bringing all these financial services to the masses with 5G and mobile phone in everybody's hand. It will be exciting to see what innovation comes out.
So thanks, Surojit, and I have got a lot of questions. I don't think we will be able to obviously take all of those. That obviously shows that the audience has been really engaged, listening to what all of you had to say. But two questions that quickly I'll try and to take. One is, what are your thoughts on banks themselves building their own digital products and easily marketing it to their customers? And how will fintechs be able to compete with big banks going full stack on digital products? So I would open it up to all of you, whoever would like to answer this.
Can I start by giving a little bit of the European context and flavor? And my honest view is, and Mrs. Bhattacharya has run a massive bank. She'll probably have a very good understanding of this. I honestly feel much that even all our clients are also banks, and Dilip, you and I are in this together. I honestly feel that traditional banks with their legacy systems and legacy mindsets are going to have a really big challenge to innovate fast enough. And therefore, our earlier comment on collaboration, is going to be absolutely critical for them with fintechs and other players. Now, here's the issue. Every bank believes that they can do a better job than anyone else, and they should do their own destiny and they should control their own customer. I honestly think that this is exactly what Europe did for many years until the European Commission slapped them with open banking regulations, which in effect means that if you are a fintech player and I want to use that product and I allow that fintech player to pull my HDFC bank account details into the interface that fintech is going to provide to me, they will have a legitimate legal right to tell HDFC that you will share your API for me to have Ari's account embedded into my application. Now, right now in India, and Amitabh, you've seen it even while you were in MasterCard, right? Having some of those conversations, the smaller banks come much faster because they want to innovate, they want to try something new. The bigger banks want to protect their turf and don't want to open up, right? I honestly feel that if you want to make this scale where the consumer or the business interest that you're serving is at the heart of that engagement and their interest is going to be protected, I see a future that India should actually go towards open banking regulation, as opposed to where today a lot of the examples are open banking where people have done individual collaboration to create open banking plays. I think the UPI INPS is a massive step in that quasi-open banking arena, but you need to take that a further step, further and really make that a much more vibrant play.
Oh, that's an excellent response, Ari. Dilip, would you like to add to that?
Madam spoke about it briefly, but I have really not understood that why banks are hesitating to invest into the fintechs so that they can use those fintechs, right, for their own. If you look at what is the technology area which is making the changes, one is the AI, right? So cannot a large bank identify 5 startups working on AI and use it by themselves, provide them the business, but allow them to work with others as well to change the technology game for that particular bank? Today the banks have multiple apps. Cannot bank invest into 5 top class cutting edge app development companies and get this done? Instead of giving the contract, why don't invest, have a better control, better monitoring, and deliver it by yourself? My madam spoke about putting 200 crore fund aside and investing. I'm saying, see, today the startups of 10 people, 20 people do not require a lot of money. They require maybe a crore or a couple of crore to survive for 3 years, 5 years time. Looking at that, if the banks are able to invest into it, provide them some fund, in return, get a lot of work done at which the banks are not able to do or the players are not able to do. I think that's a winning model. I don't know why that model is not scaling up in India. I think it's high time. It's high time that the bank should identify 4 or 5 key areas, right? For example, AI-based decision making, right? Whether it's a credit algorithm, whether it's a customer service algorithm. I'm just saying it's not very difficult to be. You don't need multi-million dollars to build this kind of technology in today's with the technology changes. What we are looking at, it's all open source driven. Today my daughter is learning at year 10, learning Python coding. So I have not forced her to do that. She's doing by all her interest. But I'm just saying that the technology is getting better and better. So I think if the bank go one step ahead of collaboration into an investment and a utilization strategy, right? It will give multi-fold returns back to the bank. There is no need to look at this from a valuation perspective. This is not valuation. This is only getting yourself better. And today, whether you like it or not, our public sector banks cannot have the technology driven people, because they have the generic banking skill set and they're doing a great job looking at what the skill set and the development opportunities. But if you want to compete in today's world, you need that cutting edge technology. And I think rather than looking at how do we build internally, I think they should crowdsource some of, and we paying small money, they can get the skill set acquired, which will be by their side to fight this fintech. So they have to use fintech, small startups, to fight the fintech battles.
Can I add something quickly?
Sure.
Slightly contrarian view, Dilip. I respect your view. I think that should happen, but I don't see that happening even in other countries. Like even in the US, last 10 years, all the innovation in fintech has not come from the banks.
Exactly.
Right? It's funded by the VCs, angels, and if you look at Stripe or Square, all these companies like stellar companies that have come up and innovated, and many digital-only banks, they're all funded by VCs. And in fact, a lot of banks, they try to invest, try to create similar things, and somehow has not worked out. So I don't know why. I agree with your hypothesis that it should happen. It just hasn't happened.
I guess Dilip was making that point, I think, quite candidly, and I must compliment him for that. That seeing this trend, I guess the question that comes to the mind is, why are banks absent? I think that's
it's never late. It's never late in my assessment.
Sure. Quickly, one last question. Can't resist the temptation of asking this question, ma'am, and this goes to you, and of course others can chime in. And which is, I think, a very important aspect of the whole digitization journey, which is, what's the biggest roadblock for a fully digitalized India? Is it education? And I would take the liberty of also, deducing that as customer awareness, right? Education and awareness. Can educating about fintech, UPI, all the other apps, all the other platforms that are there, will that increase the use of online payments safely, securely, and help adoption? So how important is awareness and education?
So let me very quickly answer this before I log off, because I have to. Education is definitely one of the biggest pillars, of ensuring that more and more of our population participate in this particular area of digitization and using digital channels. But I think we also need to understand that there is an infrastructure issue. So the entire country may actually have communication network, but there are very large number of great spots. Even in a high rise in Mumbai, sometimes I'd need to move around with a mobile like you would move around with a Geiger counter, trying to find 3 stripes, okay? Because the signal has fallen off. This happens even in high rises of Mumbai. Forget about the inner reaches of the villages. So infrastructure is definitely an issue. And also the cost of the devices. The devices that are required for you to have a great experience on the digital channels, not everybody can afford them still in India. So I think, there is an issue between, and which I think Dilip talked about the increasing gap between the haves and the have-nots. That is something that needs to be addressed, and addressed in a comprehensive manner. I know there are people who are working very hard in order to bring affordable devices into the Indian households. That is a need, absolutely. The infrastructure is a need, and thereafter, of course, education is a need. So all of these 3 things, I think, have to happen before we can see, as he was saying, 10x the numbers that are going through today from the digital channels actually going through. Everybody wants that comfort of being able to work 24 by 7 by 365 from the comfort of their homes. Nobody really wants to go and stand at a bank counter or anywhere else in order to do these transactions. The fact that we are not able to do it is not only because of education, but because of infrastructure issues as well.
I just don't feel like closing this really, really interesting conversation, but unfortunately, time beckons, and we will need to close the discussion at this point. But my heartfelt thanks on behalf of Razorpay to all of you. I think this was such a candid, such an engaging, and such an insightful conversation. I am definitely going to go and look at the recording again. That I know for sure, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to do that. So lots of thanks to all of you again, and have a great day ahead, and see if you can log into probably watch some of the other sessions between today and tomorrow. So thanks a lot, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.